Is everyone ready? Okay. The time is now 5:05 p.m. This meeting has been duly posted, and we have a quorum. Welcome to the Superintendent's Evaluation Ad Hoc Committee meeting. Please stand and join me in a moment of silence and a pledge of allegiance. I pledge of allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible. Good evening and welcome to the Superintendent's Evaluation Ad Hoc Committee meeting of the Dallas Independent School District Board of Trustees. I'd like to recognize the ad hoc committee members that are present: Trustee Ben Mackey, Trustee Carla Garcia, and I'm Dan Mitchkay, the committee chair. We are joined by our Superintendent of Schools, Dr. Michael Hinojosa. Chief Lear, we did reach out to the other board members who are always welcome to attend any ad hoc committee meeting. Okay, thank you very much. So we have on agenda item 3.01, discussion of Superintendent of Schools Evaluation Instrument and the 2019-2020 targets. And Pam, does everybody have a copy of what I have up here? Yes. Okay. Would you, Dr. Lear, would you like to give us your summary of what your suggestions are? And this is all based on last year's instrument and the discussion we had in the workshop.
Correct.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. So you have 3 documents in front of you, and I just want to orient you to what they are. And the first document is the orange colored tool, and that's the superintendent's 18-19 evaluation. So that's his evaluation from last year. And I just wanted you to be able to see what it looked like. And then the other 2 documents, you can tell the difference because in the upper right-hand corner, you'll have a version 1 and a version 2. So these 2 documents really represent what our draft or our proposal of the superintendent's evaluation for the 19-20 school year. The difference between the 2 documents is simply adding the middle school or the middle grades goal that came from our October 17th goals workshop. So version 1, you'll see KPI 1.2 incorporates middle grades, and version 2, you'll notice the full goal on goal 5 is about middle grades. We took out the extracurricular and we substituted it with the middle grades. So that came out of our meeting October 17th. So I just wanted to quickly orient the committee to those documents. So
on that point, with the
yes.
extracurricular, I thought there was, of course we didn't vote on it, but I thought there was a mixed set of views on whether we should do that.
And so if you look at version 1, you'll see that the extracurricular goal 5 is still there. So version 1, goal 5 is about extracurricular. I just made 2 documents so that you could see the options that we selected at the October 17th goals workshop.
And on that same thought, because because I know we didn't get to a full answer on which way we were going to go with that. But I think there's also will in places, or at least worthy of discussion, because personally, I think, like to me, I think extracurriculars, we've done that great. And I would be one of the proponents for removing it altogether. And if we decided to keep middle grades in goal 1, then staying with 4 goals would be preferable to me than having 5. And so I wonder what this would look like and how that would change in the case of having 4 goals instead of 5, if that became a discussion.
Okay, and I can certainly make that adjustment. So, and let me just repeat it to make sure I have it. Keep the middle grades as a KPI under goal 1 and take out the extracurricular. So
Yes.
that would be the third option.
Yes.
Okay.
And typically how that would work is that 60% of my evaluation is on student achievement. And so the percentages would be increased. We had 4 last year, so at 15% for each goal. And then since there's 5 this year, it's 12% for each goal as one option. So that's one way to go if you did that.
Okay, and Dr. Weir, I didn't mean to open this up for
Oh, no worries.
a lot of discussion at this point. But let me go ahead and ask you to go ahead and complete your
Okay,
overall
sure.
summary, and we'll.
Absolutely. So let's just go through version 1, and you can see, sorry, the goals actually mirror our district goals and what we discussed and presented October 17th. So I won't go over those goals in depth, but if we look at the targets, and I'm doing this simply because we have new committee members on the superintendent's committee, you can see that we start in 2016-17, and we were at 39%. And so that's an actual. Then we went to 43% the following year, 46% in 18-19. So for 19-20, we're looking at unsatisfactory, which would be 0 points, anything less than 46. Somewhat satisfactory would be a 0.5 point, and that would be 46. Fully satisfactory would be 1 point, and we have a target of 48. That 48 mirrors the district goal. That's where we're saying that we're going to be in 19-20. And then clearly superior would give extra points of 1.5, which is at 49. So this simply mirrors what we discussed at the goal workshop. Then when we go through KPI 1.1 through 1.4, we're really looking at the state assessment at meets. The KPI 1.2 is also looking at the state assessment at meets, but only for grades 7 and 8. The 1.3 looks at the growth, so that is 2A, or domain 2A. And then 1.4 is looking at the difference or the comparison between state economically disadvantaged versus the district economically disadvantaged. And if you look, you see negative numbers, and it's just stating that our economically disadvantaged students did better than the state in previous years. And what we always strive to do is for there to be no gap. And so that's why we have 0 for the fully satisfactory, and then -1 for clearly superior. If we go to goal 2, this is our K3 goal, and you can see that it's the same goal that we discussed October 17th. We have a KPI that looks at pre-K class data. You can see where our targets are, and we pretty much have a 1-point gain for each category. KPI 2.2 really looks at second grade, and we're looking at ISIP data. And I'm just going to note, again, this will be our last year using ISIP, and we will transition to using a different assessment, which is MAP. 2.3, we're looking at third grade African American achievement. And again, we have highlighted our African American student population because in every data set, we see that our African American students are not achieving at their peer level. And if we look at goal 3, you'll see that the goal is the same as October 17th discussion, and then our KPIs reflect, they're the same as our goal 2 and the goal 2 KPIs, but the content area is mathematics. So goal 2 focuses on reading, goal 3, mathematics. Goal 4 is our college readiness goal. And then you'll see the KPI for 4.1 really looks at associate's degree. And you can see where our targets are. Last year, we were at 66%. We're saying somewhat satisfactory is at 68, fully satisfactory is at 70%, and clearly superior would be at 72%. We turn the page, we have KPI 4.2, which also mirrors our GPMs and our goals, and that's looking at industry-based certifications. And given that we are placing a focus on career institutes, we believe that that's something that we should measure. This is also data that we'll get from the TAPER report on an annual basis. KPI 4.3 is really looking at participation in advanced courses. And you can see last year we were at 74.1%, and somewhat satisfactory will be at 75, fully satisfactory would be 76, and clearly superior 77. And then our extracurricular goal and KPI remains the same. So this looks the same as what our district goals look like. I'm going to have Dr. H go through the financial piece.
Dwayne, you might want to come up as a resource. The first piece is the annual audit. The MW stands for material weakness or significant deficiencies. When we started this journey, there were a large number of those. We have stabilized the audit reports, and they're in much better shape. So that's what that represents. The general fund surplus is, did we exceed, or did we you see prior years where there was one where we used up part of the fund balance? I mean, the general fund that year, we had $23 million negative, but then you've seen how we've added in subsequent years. And so the targets are based upon having a balanced budget or adding money to the fund balance. The first is the Financial Integrity Rating System of Texas. That's done by whom, Dwayne? Is that the Comptroller's Office?
Yes, through Comptroller/TEA.
And so there's only one, there used to be a variation of standards, but the S, I think, just stands for mid-standard, is that right?
Superior.
Superior. Can't get bonus points, because that's the most you can get. So Dwayne, anything you need to clean up on what I just said?
No, sir.
Okay. And then the last, or the remaining part of the tool is stakeholder satisfaction. And we use from Dr. Oakley's office, we have our climate surveys as well as our surveys to our parents as well as the tax payers. So you can see where we landed on those surveys in 18-19, and then you can move over to see what the targets are for what we're proposing for this year. And then the latter part, or this last section here, is 4% would be the board actually evaluating the superintendent.
And that's the one portion of the evaluation that is subjective and that is actually confidential. That's the only portion of this evaluation that's confidential.
And so very quickly on, and actually I don't know that I need to go over it, on version 2, the only things that change, like we talked about before, is I just took out the extracurricular on goal 5 and substituted it with middle grades. And then you'll notice that the KPIs on goal 1, we only have 3. Since, if this is the document that the committee selects or the board uses for our district goals, then we wouldn't have a goal for middle grades and a KPI under goal 1. So that's how those differ. And with that, for this portion, we would be happy to address any questions.
Okay. Trustee Mackey?
Okay, I got a few questions. So, thank you for all this, again, all the work. So obviously I wasn't here in the last few meetings, et cetera. My first question is just overall, what was the history and the reasoning behind ending up at 60% versus 40% in all that, and how to break the 40% down into 20 and 20?
Sure.
This was done by the board. At one time, under HOSA 1.0, when we had the budget shortfall, at that time, financial stewardship was 30%, and student achievement was 50%. But since the finances improved significantly, the board decided to scale that back to 20% and increase student achievement, keeping the main thing, at a majority of my evaluation, especially since teachers and principals get evaluated on student achievement as well. So the board at that time felt it was important to give a greater weight on student achievement than financial stewardship, since financial stewardship had improved significantly. And at the time, we had 37 improvement required schools, and our student achievement was not headed in the right direction.
Gotcha. And then the clearly superior, essentially the bonus half a point for everything. So it makes the evaluation 150 points total, is that correct? If you could technically earn up to 150 points. Do we do that anywhere else in the district at any other excellence initiative or anything? Do we have anything where people can earn more points for certain areas than their full credit?
Not to my knowledge, other than maybe distinguished teachers.
And on TEI, you have the best of 3. So you have 3 options, you get the best of 3. That would be the only thing I can.
Have we thought about looking at that? Because again, I think when we set out targets and we aim to hit them, when you add extra points in one, you can compensate quite a bit. Not that anyone's trying to do that, but take that all aside. It sometimes masks areas where we would otherwise fall short, et cetera. So the overall score would be really good. And I'm wondering what was the reasoning for including that? What was the history of that, same way as the percentages?
That was introduced by Jack Lowe during this version of under in HOSA 1.0, that you would be given extra credit for exceeding a more rigorous goal. It's something that a lot of CEOs in the country do. According to Jack Lowe's presentation, that's when it started. Then when I left, they went away from this instrument, and when we brought it back, we just kept the same structure that had been introduced before.
So I'll just speak for myself. That's helpful context. I think in a lot of these, so if we do decide to keep the clearly superior in that point, I would like to see that personally be very tough to meet. I think, in a lot of these, it's 1 percentage point. Otherwise, I got some specifics, like the audit financial statement. The clearly superior is to keep the same rating that we've had for the last 3 years. Like that might be one that we scale it back to the highest you can get this year is to be fully satisfactory. And the other one, KPI 4.2. I know this is something we're aiming to go from 1.1 to 37% over the next few years. We already have an idea of how many students are in the pipeline for a lot of those, but I think like the differentiation between all of these, between 1.1, 1.3, 1.5, and 1.7, what's the reasoning for that differentiation, and why 1.7 was determined to be clearly superior, or 1.5 was determined to be fully satisfactory, and 1.3 was slightly satisfactory?
You know what, Trustee Mackey, which document are you looking at?
I am on KPI 4.2 on both documents.
4.2. Oh, okay. Okay, and ask me that question again.
So how is it determined, like the 1.1 to 1.7 in there, in the goal that's going from
Oh, I
1.1 to
see.
37%? Why were those determined as the breakdowns between
I see.
unsatisfactory to
Yeah,
clearly
right.
superior?
And so this is a new KPI, and, you know, it really comes from our goals. And we always look at the trend data, and so we have 2 years of data, and, I mean, we have very low numbers at this point. And you can see from 17-18 to 18-19, we actually fell. We dropped. So we don't believe we have enough years worth of data to, you know, to have, I mean, the drops are, you know, I don't believe we have enough data to provide enough to give a trend that's more substantial.
And on the goals when we met, we know what's coming up because this is of the graduates. And so the goal for 23-24 is 37%, but it needs to be ramped up. And I think the teaching and learning indicated that we weren't quite there yet. So we somehow know that it's not going to increase very significantly yet, but we know that they're doing something to put it forward by 23-24.
Now,
And
those
the-
industry-based certifications, they require multiple years of pathways to get, right?
Correct.
Right.
And we haven't even launched
Right,
completely
Career
the career institutes. I mean, they're in the planning stages. We have freshmen that are just getting in courses, and we haven't even built the 4 facilities. Those numbers will exponentially go up, but they count after their senior year. So this is far away, and this is kind of the data that we have projected at this early stage.
Is this one lagging, or is this based on the year's graduates, what we have?
Right. It's
Lagging. This one's
On
lagging.
the,
Yeah,
because we get on the taper in November.
it's lagging.
So how many, so we should actually know how many students we have that met this industry-based certification from last year that graduated, that would be on this year's report, correct? So we already,
Well, we are trying to get all that. We estimated the 42, but we're pretty sure that we don't have all the data. So we're working through that. So yes and no. So we know it's low still, but I don't think we know exactly yet. We are working through that.
okay, and I think, just in general, I think in items like this, that it is lagging, that we're setting this now in November and December. We already have the data on it for the most part. It might not be officialized by the state of Texas, if officialized is a word, but we have an idea of what that's going to be. So I don't, you know, thinking about why we're putting, if we already know what that number is going to be pretty close to, why we're choosing this variance, why we're allocating 2 points to it, et cetera. I think to look at some of those that are lagging, that we already have the data on, that we're setting, or at least for us to know before we make a decision on this is how many students we actually expect to have that this year based on last year's graduates. And so then we can have a conversation about these percentages. Here's what could change that going forward. The other question that I have, I think this is more of a broader one. I kept going back after the training for the board stuff to AE local, which is a big one. And, you know, a lot of those pieces, especially about culture and climate, and theory of action is the big one that I know is something I think the district has got behind for a while. My question is there a way to consider, I think we think about theory of action and school-based leadership, and, you know, our goal is to create a culture. Some of the concerns that I personally see, and maybe Cecilia, you can steer me differently on this, is that, for instance, a climate survey, which is used at almost every single level to look at, principals look at teachers that way, principals are then judged on that, executive directors are then judged by their principal scores and so on up. That, you know, when we use that same one, people really get in the zone about working towards that in all of that. I think there would be value in, for instance, taking a poll of just principals that is not touched by feeder pattern. You can't disaggregate it based on that. Just as a general climate of, say, school leadership, or a general climate of the district that's not already used in evaluations all the way up, to get a clearer picture of the superintendent as a whole and how the culture of the district is rolling out. Is that something we can consider looking at or thinking about in this process? I know it would require another survey, but it might be a meaningful way to get a sense of something that is separate and apart solely for the superintendent, rather than being used at evaluations all the way up the chain.
Your thoughts?
Well, the answer is we can certainly do that.
Yeah.
The question is, does the administration have any objection? And Dr. Hinojosa, you in particular.
I don't know where this whole line of questioning is going. I'd like to know that.
That's just a general question, so the theory of action as far as that. So we have this AE local and thinking about theory of action, managed instruction, earned empowerment, but I don't see that reflected here. How are we reflecting that, I guess? It's in AE local, it's part of the educational philosophy of the district. So that's what whether we get it that some way or another, that's what I'm trying to ask a question around.
I don't understand your question.
Okay, I'll think about it and rephrase it then.
Thank you.
Okay, Trustee Garcia.
Thank you. Quick question on looking at goal 4, and it says collegiate high school students. So we're talking about only early college high school students would be held accountable to earning the associate's degree or 60 credit hours. Is that correct? Or are we talking about your general high school student?
So the way we have it here is collegiate high school, which would also include the early college high schools.
So it's
standalone.
inclusive of all students or just early
No,
college?
it's only the early college model.
Right.
Which could include collegiate,
Academy and early college.
yeah, the P-TECH, the official P-TECH, and then the standalones, and then the others that are not P-TECH. So it's the 25 high schools. But you cannot earn an associate's degree without going through one of those paths. So that's why it's limited to those.
So the denominator are the number of collegiate academy graduates, not total graduates.
Now, what percentage of that would be what percentage in that denominator would be of those eligible students compared to the entire high school senior population?
We kind of have that information, we have that data somewhere else. And part of that is, about a quarter of the students next year will be in one of these programs. But the senior class, we need to get that information
Yeah.
tighter.
Right.
So for this school year, there's going to be an additional 8 schools. And we had five. So it'll be a total of 13 schools for this year. And then next year, all of them come on board, and we'll have to adjust.
And that would start with freshmen.
But
It's
yes,
seniors, though.
but we look only at the graduates.
So next year you have 25 with those high school seniors.
Actually, we'll have 23 with high school seniors. The only 2 that would not would be Skyline and Northlake, and they will only have sophomores.
Oh, okay.
And those are to be, but all the other high schools will have seniors in the 2021 school year,
Except one. Woodrow Wilson.
except Wilson, except Cricks.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, and I recall from our discussion on the 17th, there was a KPI around financial aid completion. I don't see that reflected here.
No, we didn't. The superintendent's evaluation is, not everything that's on the district goals come in here. We had a discussion to think about, which goals and which GPMs we would actually transfer over. And that wasn't one that we transferred, but it's certainly still in the district goals.
Okay, and also wanted to ask about considering college readiness, it's something that starts before high school. So would almost encourage a discussion to include something around a middle grade, say 8th grade.
So college readiness, we always measured at the meets, star at meets, and so I think we have it here under goal 1. Well,
KPI 1.2.
Well, we measure it at domain 1 on this case.
So it's under goal 1 and KPI 1.2. But it's 7th and 8th grade.
That's right.
And it's at meets. Does that get at your question?
It does, it does. I'm just considering where it makes most sense as a
Okay.
standalone, but.
Mm-hmm.
And also further into 4.3, participating, can you clarify a little more? Is it just the students enrolled in any one of these given classes that completes any of those credits?
Correct. It's purely participation in rigorous courses, and we've just listed what exemplifies rigorous.
Do we know what percentage of our students that enroll in these AP courses, IB dual credit, end up earning I believe it's a score of 3 on the AP exam to be considered qualifying for
Yes,
credit? Do we
that-
know roughly what that is?
I
for our
can't give
students?
it to you right now, but I know that it's something that we track with Dr. Durant's department in advanced academics, so I will follow up and get that for you.
So I think it's one thing to participate in courses, and it's another to actually earn qualifying scores to earn credit.
In Domain 2A or Domain 2, we have that detailed in those reports from TEA, and it shows the percent of the graduates, how many earned it just that by itself. And I didn't bring the right notebook, but let me see if I can pull it up.
So Trustee Garcia, 2 things I'm going to follow up on for you, and that's the percentage of P-TECH and early college high school students versus all students, right?
Yes, and I would also just include their projected growth.
Projected growth.
Well, this is the superintendent, this is 1 year, excuse me.
Okay.
What those look like for each of the 23 high schools coming up for next year.
So how many more students are coming in? How many do we expect to come in the
Yes, that
freshman
would be
year?
helpful to
Then-
see.
And so the design is to be somewhere between 100 and 125 students per grade level is the design.
Okay.
But
So I do have the information now for the 2018 graduates, and this includes AP with a 3 or better, or IB with a qualifying score for IB, and it was 22% of all of our graduates
Okay.
had a qualifying score.
And that's in any single given test? not-
Correct.
Okay.
Now I need to qualify that. I believe it says you have to, okay, that was AP, that's correct. Okay, AP, you have to have it read in English or math or, let me look at, 1 second.
For CTE courses, is there anything comparable to the 3 in the AP exam? I don't know what it is for IB. Is it simply finishing the course? Or is there a certain score or grade for students to earn the credit for those specific courses?
Right. In CTE, there are dual credit CTE courses, and then they also have certification. But if you're asking if there's a actual exam that the students take, no, unless they're doing some type of certification.
That's all I have so far. Thank you.
Okay, just a few questions. So we still have to set our final district goals.
Correct.
Right? So what we've got in front of us is just a draft of what we think our district goals will be and how that we would adapt them
Right.
to this instrument. So if we make changes to the district goals, we'll be making conforming changes to the
Evaluation.
similar provisions of this instrument.
Right.
With that as a qualification, does anybody at this point see any of the performance targets here as not being appropriate, not being rigorous enough, being too rigorous in any particular case? You'll have a second chance to revisit that issue as, when we finalize the district goals, but we might as well flag anything here that that we see right now as being problematic.
So, I mean, I kind of vocalized this already about the clearly superior, like, that's a good bump there. I just want to make sure that that is rigorous. I don't know, I'd be interested to see past evaluations and just how we have done that and what percentage we usually, clearly superior. And again, Dr. Hinosa, you've done a phenomenal job over the last few years with this. But just in making sure and thinking about it, I think, like, especially if we are looking at, and one of the things that I would love to see us look at is how the superintendent contract and the evaluation system, how that aligns with what we're doing for executive directors, principals, and teachers all the way down. And so that's why I wanted to be equally rigorous in terms of that aspect. As far as these specific numbers, I'm going to take a little bit more time to look at those and pull those apart, and I'll think about those and reach out with any questions that I have with regards to that. My other question here is on the performance levels. Is there any correlation between the performance levels down here, the percent and the numbers specified in the contract that come with a certain percentage raise? Or they just, this is just?
After we get done with this, then I do want to share the incentive plan, but this is the evaluation tool by itself. And
Right,
then-
but these numbers are separate from the numbers in the contract for just the percentage raise, not the incentive bonuses.
Right, that incentive bonus is not in here.
No, but that's not the question he's asking. In my new contract, which is a new provision this year, if I get 69 points or less,
Oh,
I get a 0% increase.
right, correct.
If I get from 70 to 79, I think I get 1%.
Yes.
That's what he's asking about. So yes, it is aligned to this instrument. So the total numbers would dictate what percentage raise I get.
Right, but these numbers, the 0 to 49, is not representative of what's reflected in the contract, is what I'm saying. Is that the goal as it should be? This should be 0 to 69, 70 to 79, 80 to 89, and 90 to 99?
And I think the contract
And-
specifies, I have it here, that if it's, let me just get it out.
That's the question, is like, should those two be, should those two be aligned, or is that?
Walk around with the contract. And on AP, it's any subject. I clarified.
Yeah, page 9 of the contract says in 3.1A, the superintendent's evaluation, total evaluation score is 0 to 69. The superintendent gets this automatic salary increase of 0. 70 to 79 is 1%, 80 to 89 is 2%, 90 to 99 is 3%, and if it's over 100, it's 4%.
So that's what I'm asking, is
Oh.
how, what is this, the unsuccessful 0 to 49? Is that just a totally different scale?
Yes.
That has nothing to do with the percentages?
Right, that, if you look at the top where the targets are, where you see US is unsatisfactory, 0 points, somewhat satisfactory, 0.5, that's the score he would get for that particular KPI.
And let me explain some history on that too, because previously there was no provision for a salary increase, except that my contract would roll over another year if I was determined to be proficient. So it was arbitrarily set at 70. If you're 70, you're proficient, you get an automatic contract extension. When this contract was negotiated, those automatic extensions went away, but that language still exists.
Gotcha.
So there are no automatic extensions. This contract has a set term, and it will expire on a certain date. But that's where the history of that was. You need to come up with a 70 so that the board could know whether I earned another year or not. So it is really not comparable. Yeah.
It's a marking for this contract, but not
Yes.
necessarily for anything else. Yeah, so my overall is on the clearly superior. If we're scaling this contract to a 99 to 100, I think we just have to make sure that those are very rigorous. Again, I think it should be tough to meet. I think it's definitely should be meetable with blowing it out of the park. But, I'm hesitant to also see where if you blow it out of the park in certain areas, like I know we did extracurriculars, knocked it out of the park these last few years. So those points could make up for other areas that are just as important or we wanted to weight as much. But when you look at the overall number, it kind of gets lost.
I understand.
Well, we can certainly provide the old evaluations
Oh,
with the
absolutely.
actual numbers. Because we can go back for the past 4 years, right?
Yes. And I'll get that for you.
I also wanted to pass along a comment about the stakeholder satisfaction, which is that the Board of Trustees, in that subjective portion of the evaluation, currently have 4 points out of, the evaluation by the Board of Trustees is currently 4 points out of 100.
Right.
Right? And I've heard in our discussions about this, that number, that some trustees feel like that number should be higher.
Okay.
And first, Dr. Hinojosa, do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, part of this is to take the subjectivity out, is to see if because most other superintendents get evaluated about emotion and who yelled at the board members at the grocery store, and it was all based on those kinds of things instead of actual performance. And so when this board went to that, this board and the previous board decided that it should be based upon data and not emotion, and that's why it was set. There has been some discussion. It's been higher before. In fact, the last board thought it was too high because there were certain board members that all they cared about was, what certain employee groups were saying. So I think it was less than the 4%. From at one point, it was maybe 10%. So if you do it, then you got to get those percentages from somewhere else. I also want to remind the board that we're kind of late in this game. We're already a quarter of the school year already done. And to set up this instrument, we're delayed because the board did not want to do this in September, so they punted. And so now we're getting to this point of getting the contract done, which took 3 months. And now the evaluation instrument needs to be adjusted for next year. But for example, Cecilia, we'll be doing surveys. When do you do those other stakeholder satisfaction surveys?
The stakeholder, the public.
Parents, the taxpayers, the students, the staff?
The staff, we.
Well,
are
those,
gonna-
that's done in April, or when
We're
do you do
doing the
this?
staff, well, they're all in the spring, so the students are like March, April, and then we start with the parents, April, May, and then the stakeholders are over the summer.
Yeah. So if you want to have more subjectivity, you can certainly increase that value, but you'll have to reduce it from another value if you want to have more subjectivity rather than objectivity. And then it will have to just depend on, of course, this will be for the, evaluation will be for the following year, because we're already a quarter into the current year. But actually, they'll be doing those surveys in this current academic year, but they'll be reported next November. So it's almost ex post facto, so we just need to make some decisions. If the board wants to get more subjective, then certainly, and I need to see whether I want to agree to that or not, because I'm already getting evaluated on things that school year's already started on. So I'll have to go back and consider which ones I would accept and which ones I wouldn't.
Okay, I understand. I don't think that there's a sense on this board to go to a largely subjective evaluation, and I think anywhere in the 4 to 10 range is still a pretty objective evaluation. I don't have a sense, though, of what all board members feel about this. I'm just bringing this up because this is one of the issues that we need to address in this committee and think about. And Dr. Lear, I think we will need that November 15th meeting.
Okay.
Because I think that'll give us some more time to flesh out some of these particular issues.
Dr. Lear, beginning with the end in mind, okay, there's a couple of moving parts here. One is when do the goals have to be adopted? When does the incentive plan have to be adopted? And then we have some other meetings, and then we have a night meeting, and then my evaluation for this year needs to be done in December. So will you kind of give us kind of
Yes.
all what the timelines are going forward?
I will, yes. So we have 2 days that are remaining to speak with this committee about Dr. H's evaluation. And one of those 2 days is now. The next date is November 15th. And at that time, the committee will need to agree on and have a recommendation for the board. And then we will have a night meeting, the November, I want to say it's 21st meeting, and that's where the board will discuss the evaluation, and this committee will give them the recommendation. In Dr. Hinojos' contract, we have until November 30th. So November 30th is the deadline for his incentive plan and his new evaluation tool. And then in December, you'll have a meeting for his evaluation for the 18-19 school year.
Okay, but I certainly think we should try to meet all of those deadlines as written in the contract. I'd also just note that the parties, the superintendent and the board, can agree to modify if we determine that we've got something that needs more time to resolve. I just also wanted to make a comment on KPI 4.3. It's only 2 points in the evaluation out of 100, but I've always been troubled by this one that merely taking one dual credit course is a significant indicator. When you consider that, we've got other items on here that are much more consequential, like career readiness.
Right.
I can make the argument the other way that in a district where we've got so many kids growing up in poverty, giving that exposure to a dual credit course and passing a college course is a way to perhaps open the door to a more expanded view of what they can achieve. But I've always kind of thought this one was a little bit overvalued. I think, just to finish up on this, I think we do need to get some sort of a consensus on the quote bonus points in the clearly superior category. I've thought they've worked well in the past, but I'm certainly persuaded by Trustee Mackey that we need to take a hard look at whether or not this is something we want to do in the future. I don't think just because we've done it in the past that we need to continue to do it. So I want all of us to be open-minded about changes. We have a new board. And half the board has been here, for 18 months or less. So we do need to be willing to consider other ideas. And I'm hoping that after our committee gets the chance to review the evaluation instruments as completed for the past 3 or 4 years, that we can come back on November 15th with a decision on
I could definitely by Thursday, but maybe even tomorrow. So that you can, especially Trustee Mackey and Garcia can see those. And just so that I'm clear on the clearly superior, are we saying that we want to look at the targets to ensure that they're rigorous enough? Or are we saying we want to, you're considering taking that complete column out?
Well, I think, and I'll let Trustee Mackey clarify this, but I think he sort of raised both issues, whether they were rigorous enough and then whether or not it was consistent with the system that we have for evaluating other educators in the system.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I mean, I sort of like the inertia because I've been part of this committee for a couple of years and have adopted this form, but I recognize the fact that we have to be able to be willing to listen to new ideas, and I will listen with an open mind.
And I think my question just comes, and I could see it going either way, because there's no way that we would take these away, and then the contract says he must get a 99 or above. Like, that doesn't make any sense. What I'm saying is that it's got to be thought of as one system. I mean, this is not a 100-point system. This is a 150-point system, and everything else needs to make sense in concert of that. And that's the point I'm making. So I
I
think.
take issue with that because in the last 3 years, I was over 100 one year. I was at 90-something one year. I was at 80-something the year before. So for you to articulate that this is a 150-point system, it's never been over 110. It may be this year, but we had a great year this year. And there are some zeros where I get zeros. There are some of these where I get
Right.
no value. So, and we'll show you those in those instruments, but I don't want to leave it that it's a 150-point system, because it's nowhere near a 150-point system.
No, and I take and receive that 100%. I mean, that's not the point that I'm trying to make. And I think just look, it'll help me probably to see a lot of those and to see where it is. But that was just my question over the overall.
Sure.
Okay, let's turn to the incentive plan.
Okay. And I think, did you pass those out?
Yes, I did.
Oh,
pass
okay,
them out already.
perfect.
And here's the board.
Oh, great.
Yes. Want me to do it?
Let me see, where's mine? Oh. And so I'll just quickly go over what we've already talked about. I think most of our discussion will probably be on the new items. The last time we were here and reported the incentive plan, there was a lot of discussion around adding something around market share. And so Trustee Mishke and I, as the chair, have had some discussion about that, just to clarify. And so we're bringing a couple of options for you to consider. And then, you know, if there are other things that you can think of, then we're certainly open to pulling that information.
Well, Dr. Lear, if you'd go through 1, 2, and 3, just to remind everybody.
Oh, absolutely. Yep, I will.
I don't know if we need to have any discussion on it, but just so
Sure.
we have the whole package here.
The first incentive would be 73% of seniors in early college, high school, and P-TECH will graduate with an associate's degree. And
Sorry, I did it too.
Oh, okay. The next slide simply just shows where we are as the national average of seniors who are graduating with an associate's degree, and then.
What, is that 20%?
Yes.
And we're saying 73%? Oh, my goodness.
And we also give the historical perspective, starting from 2017.
We need to get higher so we can get a bonus.
So the next slide just shows where we are, Dallas ISD, and our projection. So this gives where we are as a district with all students. And so we're projecting we'll have 668 students, which is 7.9% of our population.
And that's to your question about in comparison with all the students.
So then the KPI 4.3, 4.1 would only apply to 7.9% of the senior class.
So this one, so the 7.9 is for all students, and this one here is just for our kids, our students who are in P-TECH and early college, high school. Right. And so we thought it's always important to have context and to have comparisons. So we pulled some other urban Texas districts just so that you can see where they fell in 2017 as well as 2018. And then you can see Dallas ISD right in the middle. And in 2018, we were at 2.4%. Incentive 2 is we want to decrease the number of F schools to 0. And here's some backup data just to show a couple of other districts, San Antonio, Houston, and Fort Worth, and where they fell with F schools from 2014 through 2019. Incentive 3 is 37% of African American students will achieve at MEETS level on the STAR in Domain 1. And our stretch goal here, we have 2 trend lines. The darkest line is our Dallas results, and you can see the purple part there. We were at 31% in 17-18, 33% in 18-19. We're projecting to be at 35%, and that also mirrors our district goals for 19-20. And so for the superintendent's incentive plan, we are striving to be at 37%, which would be really on the trajectory as the state.
Okay, and before we go to number 4, just
Yep.
want to make sure that everybody on the ad hoc committee is on the same page with any issues with these 3 incentives as proposed.
Question. And so I guess the only thing to think about on incentive 1, I think that's a great one. We are doing great work there. Every kid in the ECHS or PTech is theoretically, that's a senior, is working towards getting an associate's degree, right?
Correct.
I think there may be worth considering looking at this, because what that doesn't take into account is perhaps attrition out of those programs in the 3 years prior to that senior year. So some of the more compelling ways would be this, the percentage of Dallas ISD students earning an associate's degree rising, because that's looking at with the denominator of all of our students, or percentage of students who entered an ECHS or were in it junior year or something like that. I just want to make sure that we don't lose kids who might self-select out or might be behind and select out of that program and not count anywhere in it the same way. So personally, I think it's the percentage of Dallas ISD associates earning an associate's is a more compelling one for that reason. That's just my thoughts on that.
So that's capturing the whole cohort in the denominator.
Yes, somehow.
Okay.
And then the only question I had is on the STAR meets for African American students. So we're behind the state in that.
Yes.
I would just like to see like where we are, if we have it in one slide or somewhere, us compared to the state in each of those subgroups, and then overall. I think just to help me visualize.
So the next slide there gives you a comparison of the state, Houston and Fort Worth. And we selected Houston and Fort Worth because they had a higher percentage of African American students. So you can see where they performed in 17-18 and then their gains in 18-19.
So I guess here's my question then. So the goal in this one is going from 33 to 37%, correct?
30, let me look at it. Is it? I'm sure, yes.
Yeah, so that's a
Yeah.
4%. That's the goal right there, which is a really
Right.
good one. And then just, maybe it's in here somewhere, what's our goal for meets at 3rd grade reading?
Reading for all students?
Yes.
We
Or just,
are,
I guess it's both reading and math. What's that?
For reading, this year it's 42,
Yes.
and for math, it's 44.
42. And that's up from what?
40 and 42.
Okay, yeah, okay. That makes a lot of sense.
Does that make
Thank you.
sense?
Yeah,
Okay.
that's great. So it's basically twice as fast as. yeah,
Exactly.
yeah.
And that's what we did. You'll see our goals mirror that because we're working to close the gap.
Yep.
Trustee Garcia, any questions or comments on proposed incentives 1, 2, and 3?
No, but I think trustee Mackey's question about looking at the whole denominator versus just the percentage of students in the program, to me, seems like a much more compelling argument. And I see the way that it applies to the appraisal instrument. But I do agree with trustee Mackey. Now clarify this for me one more time. We're projecting 2020, 7.9% of the entire senior class is projected to have completed an associate's degree.
Correct. On slide 4?
Yes, slide 4.
Right, because and you can see there in italics, there's an estimated 8,500 graduates for 2020.
Okay, and that's all I have up to this section.
Okay. Trustee Mishke, you want me to move forward, or you want to talk about this?
Yeah, just generally about incentive 4,
Sure.
which is the one that revolves around the issue of market share. And in the chart that's on slide 13, you'll see that almost all of the large urban districts in Texas have had declining enrollment over the last several years, and that is largely due to charter schools that are increasing their enrollment. And we always want our goals and incentives to be smart, so we want to be realistic. At the same time, we also want to make sure that we're doing everything we can reasonably do to increase our market share. And so Dr. Lear and I went back and forth as to, what made the most sense. If we decreased the amount that our market share was going down from, I guess it was somewhere in the 8% range several years ago down to the 2% range, that is an improvement in one sense, but it still represents a decline in market share and a decline in enrollment. There's another aspect to this, is that we do want to incentivize the district to do, again, everything reasonably possible to battle the charter schools for enrollment. We've got a great product, and when you look at those last 3 superintendent evaluations, you'll see that the district has been doing really, really well. And are we doing everything we can to increase our market share? So we haven't been able to come up with anything that sounds like the answer. I've been reluctant to say that if enrollment only reduces by a certain amount, that there should be an incentive bonus. I would generally want to, even if that's better than than our peer group of urban districts. If let's say they all are losing students at 10% a year, and we lose students at 1% a year in terms of enrollment. Oh, we're doing way better than they are. But is that the kind of thing that we should pay a bonus for? There's just something that doesn't sound right about it, even though I can make a case that if we're doing better than the other districts, then there should be an incentive attached to that. I would prefer to look at it in terms of market share and how our market share is is increasing or decreasing relative to the prior years. We also then had, since market share has to do with the charter schools being in our boundaries and recruiting students from us as to, what kinds of things can we do to increase our market share. And the administration is focused on things like improving student achievement, improving student options, improving customer service, and improving marketing, communicating better, and then we bounced around some strategies about, maybe we need to be targeting those seriously underperforming charter schools first, and instead of having just these sort of global broad initiatives, do things, come up with a plan to say, just the way the charter schools come and they market against us, find the underperforming charter schools first and come up with a strategy on a school-by-school basis to recruit those kids back to Dallas ISD. So we got off into all of this and then ultimately came back to these different alternatives. And Dr. Weir, I'll let you go through the ones that we've talked about. They're alternatives, they're not separate incentives.
So the first option really is looking at district enrollment. And, we have to look at, do we have when we're looking at market share, we've got to make sure that we have access to the data. And so we do have access to our enrollment, and we can measure, did we grow students or did we lose students, and at what rate? So this one simply just looks at enrollment measured by PEIMS snapshot in the fall of 2019, and we just got our PEIMS snapshot as compared to 2019. Fall 2020 PEIMS snapshot will exceed 2019 fall snapshot. And so the next chart kind of shows this. The first three numbers there just indicate the actuals. And then we worked with Velia Lara, our demographer, on developing a trend line. And so you can see for 1920, because we had our PEIMS snapshot, we were at 154,035. And so with the same trends, we're looking at 2021 to be at 152.5. And what we're saying is we will exceed for next year this year's PEIMS snapshot. So that's why you see the goal of 155. And then incentive 4B is really looking at market share. And this one is the percent change of the net transfers will decrease from 3.4% to 2%. And this chart helps explain that a little better. So this chart simply, off to the far left, going down that column, you can see just historical data, all of the years from 2012 to 13. That next column are the transfers in. So these are students who don't live in our attendance boundary who are coming into the district. The next column shows all of the students who are leaving. And then I just have the net in that next column. And then this is the column, the one that says difference of net change from previous year. This is the column that we would measure because it shows us the percent of students who have transferred. And you can see, if you look down that column, you can see that we've been going down. If you start from 15-16, we were at 11.9%, and if you go to the next year, you can see that we've been slowly reducing the number of transfers, the net transfers, and so we're suggesting that for the 1920 school year to go to just 2%. And then the last one is Dallas ISD market share. The total market share will sustain or exceed 2018-19 percentage. And this just gives us that top column there is just the years, and right under it, I'm pulling enrollment for each year, and then the next column next to it in red is the percentage of resident population. So you can read this by attending Dallas ISD. These are our PEIMS number. If I look at 2015-16, we had 158,604 students. Under that number, you'll see 238,948, and that's our total market share. So that's all of the students who are living within our boundary. So they don't all go to our Dallas ISD schools. They go elsewhere to charters, to private, homeschool, other ISDs. So you can see in 2015-16, our total market share was 66.4%. And so if you just move down the chart, you can see our last year was 2018-19, and we were at 65.04%. So what we're saying here is with the efforts, with continued efforts, and really having more, even more robust efforts, like Trustee Mishke indicated, we want to, at the very minimum, not go below the 65.04%.
And also point out that a lot of these things are out of our control, but the marketing and attracting students, we discover at Dallas ISD, which already happened last Saturday, and then all of the marketing that our individual principals do throughout the year, and the new programs we're coming out, that's somewhat within our control. But if you look at the very bottom line, people residing in Dallas went from 238 to 233 to 231 to 238. And so every time Uber comes in here or another company comes in, when we have no control over that. And so that's why that affects the percentage on this particular metric, is that, and there's a lot of companies being recruited right now. And so it's just another thing to consider, that we have almost no control over the bottom number. We have a lot more control over the top number, but that impacts the percentage.
So those are three options to consider, looking at either enrollment or market share. And of course, there has to be intentionality that goes behind making sure that we meet those goals.
Okay. Trustee Mackey.
I like that they all get to the same point a little bit different way. I think, Justin, my first reaction is that the net transfers is a kind of complex one to look at, and it's hard to necessarily understand if you're not really familiar with it, especially when you pull all that apart. So I gravitate to either the enrollment matching PEIMS. That's very clear, easy. It doesn't take into account population growth, but still we've seen declines every single year, and it's been getting better. That would be a win regardless if it just stays the same. I also think the market share gets at that. It does take into account who else is coming here and just keeping the same percentage or above. My question on that is, I guess it's more for Cecilia, how precise of a metric is that, the market share piece? Where do we pull that number from? How many kids live in the area, et cetera?
It is a projection, and hopefully we'll get new projections in 2020, but as we get further and further out, it's probably more of an estimate.
Okay, and by the demographers pull
Yes.
that?
What
Okay.
census?
And census,
Yeah.
okay. And I'm just curious, I would be curious about which one of these the administration favors and why, if there is a preference on that.
We're certainly open to any. I think the one that we have control over, where we have exact numbers, is the enrollment. The market share we could certainly do, but again, it's an estimate, and if we were looking at the trend data, I mean, both Velia and I were really surprised to see the number go to 238,000.
I'll just comment, one of the other ideas we did kick around was to measure market share with the denominator being Dallas ISD students plus all students enrolled in charter schools who live within Dallas ISD. And that takes care of the measuring aspect, that we can get definitive numbers. Doing it that way, it doesn't, take into account other things like homeschool, private school, and other ISDs that may be part of the entire market. But that's just another, at least conceptual alternative. Dr.
Yeah.
Hinojosa, so you wanted to say something about that?
Yeah, and that's really our competition that's realistic today and now is charter schools. But also then, we have trustees on the north side of the district that say there are no charter schools on the north side, and their competition is private schools. And they'll be very vocal about that if we don't include those. So just telling you, that'll be another issue to deal with. And that is their competition. But if you do the Midtown project, and if the new park and the Midtown project come to fruition, we are impacting private schools, I believe. But charter, so it's not an easy answer to this one. It's just all over the place. Could you go back to the previous one, to B, 4B?
This one?
Yeah. And it's very interesting that the different net change is trending in the right direction, but still, this is also not, how precise is this? Is this
one,
precise?
No, this one's precise. Velia got the numbers from the report.
So, would this include also privates and homeschool?
Nope, it's just charters and other ISDs.
Okay.
I think one other thing that we have to keep in mind, again, is the old adage of the perfect is the enemy of the good, right? If we can come up with a metric that is good, the fact that it's not perfect doesn't mean we should throw it out.
Right.
And the real competition is charter schools, and it's only been in the last several years that we've actually started putting up a fight instead of sitting back like a sleeping giant and let the charter schools come in and try to pick off our students from different schools with flashy marketing and new buildings. But we don't have this one stated up here yet, but 4D could be that what I had described, which would be not perfect, but still pretty good in my opinion in terms of who our real competition is. And if our percentage of the students vis-a-vis the percentage of students that are in charter schools goes up, then that would indicate that we're making progress in this area.
So I think you and I, probably a month ago, talked about that, and we came up with with a goal. So I didn't include it in here, but I will bring that one back out and present it for next time.
Well, yeah, and to state it simply for those who weren't enmeshed in this conceptual conversation, if today Dallas ISD has 75% of the total number of students that are in Dallas ISD plus charter schools, and if next year we have 77%, then that's a huge win. If the next year we have 70%, that's a huge loss. So we could do a metric like that, even though it would leave out the private schools, which in some parts of our district it may be bigger competition than charter schools, but it's charter schools that are the ones that when you look at those estimates, are the ones that are claiming or recruiting most of our students.
Dr. Lear, I have a question on this page that's up on the screen on slide 15. What's really jumps off the page at me is on the first column.
Yep.
We only had 586 students transfer in 2015. And we jumped from 586 to 1979. Derek, is any of that early childhood kids, or are all of those, what I really hear, I expect, this is probably a rhetorical question, but if we could identify where that plus came from, that's 1,400 kids that came in the last few years. Yes, we lost a lot in the red, but of those 1,400, where'd they come from? Did they come from early childhood? Did they come from private schools? Did they come from home schools? Did they come from charter schools? Ever charter? Have they ever been in the charter? I think if we saw where we're having success and did some analytics on that, that might help us inform a better goal, because we are having success with those 1,400 plus kids in the last 4 years. So, but I'd like to know, are these just early childhood kids who weren't going anywhere, but they got a free pre-K and they came in, or were they somewhere else and came in? I think that also helped us inform some other decisions that we're making.
So-
Any immediate feedback on that?
Well, these are transfers who, they don't live in our boundary, so they're coming from other
Oh, okay.
districts. And Velia does have that broken down so that we could see where kids are.
So transfers in include kids coming from charter schools into Dallas ISD, or just kids coming from another district into Dallas ISD?
I believe that the transfers in are going to be your ISDs and your charters that are coming back.
And we can dig into this a little more with Velia, but we do have some pre-K students that enroll from out of district, and we can see how much of that gap,
If
that
they
1,400
live-
gap,
if they live
pre-K accounts
outside
for.
of- Right, so they have to live outside, right. And so these are students who live outside of our boundary. So if they're in a charter that's outside of our boundary and they come in, we capture them. But
Or
it's not a
charter pre-K.
charter within our boundary.
Or Miss
These are
CISD
kids.
from pre-
Right,
pre-K.
exactly.
Okay, well, I think Trustee Mackey got it right the first time. That chart is it's got, there's too
We
much
were-
information jammed into there where we're not really able to
pull it
appreciate
out.
all the nuances.
And, and maybe we can take some of that data out. But it was compelling to see the percentages on the net going in a downward trend instead of up. And then also the transfers in, we thought were, we continue to grow in that area, so.
Trustee Garcia, you,
Question on 4C, just given the kind of the history of each of our unique districts, of each of our 9 districts, right now the resident population, it's 65.04% of those students residing in Dallas ISD boundaries that attend our schools. I'd be curious, what's the range from the majority of our districts, like District 1 to District 9? What does that look like?
The percentage of students in each district?
Attending the ISD.
Oh,
We can get that. In fact, Dustin Marshall asked for the Christmas present we gave him 3 years ago, where Valia's team came up with how their schools in their district, they have that information. So I don't know if we can, what it would take to put that together.
it took a lot.
Okay.
Because the census blocks may
Yeah.
not necessarily
Right.
align, so they'd have to.
Well, and the reason I ask is, I think each of us, given our, our unique positions within each of our districts and understanding the context of those communities to some extent would kind of help feed just what that potential market share looks like, looking at the southern sector versus the northern sector and such, but
We can certainly do that.
I love data
Yeah.
for Christmas presents too.
I think perhaps a way to get a really big picture of this is, and I know that have some information on this, is maybe going back the last 5 years, total enrollment in Dallas ISD, total enrollment in charter schools of students who live within Dallas ISD, total enrollment in private schools, and total enrollment in home schools. And if you've got any easy to gather information about neighboring ISDs, that would be great. But yeah, that would give us an idea of the size of the problems. Because my sense is that the private school competition is nowhere near as big of an issue for us as the charter school competition on a district-wide basis.
Well, I can tell you where we are with private schools now. We're 21,183 who live in our attendance area who attend private.
And 5 years ago,
And 5 years ago, it was 18, I'm at private still. This
Yeah.
is back in 15, 16, 18,297. And then for charters, in 2015, 16, we were at 30,912. And for 18, 19, 35,491.
Okay, well, that's why we look at data. That the private school component is bigger than I thought, but the charter school component is twice as large.
Mm-hmm. There's another component, and Trustee Mishke, you and I talked about this, that I found just because I looked at all of the charters and found that, who was it? I want to say it was, I looked at charters and ISDs, and we have a significant number of students who are going to a virtual school. That's Houston and Hallsville, I believe. And so one of the things we talked about is maybe even, looking at, with Angie Gaylord and Brian Lusk, how we can have a visual, kind of a virtual opportunity for our students to bring those kids back, because it was about 800 kids.
Dwayne, you and I talked about that issue, but I think the TEA has quit authorizing virtuals. I think it's only the few districts that are currently in the game that can keep that going. Dwayne, I know you and I had that conversation. What do you recall from that information?
I believe straight virtual, they've eliminated that possibility, but they made it blended, and they added in House Bill 3 funded for that. So you would have a virtual presence for a certain amount of time, and then the students would actually show up at brick and mortar for a period of time. That's their option from just straight virtual now.
And any district can exercise that option, not just the districts that already had virtual learning?
I believe you have to go through an application process, but yes.
Okay. Okay, so we may need to wrap all of this stuff up
Okay.
on the 15th, but is there anything more we can do at this point to wrap up the market share concept?
No, I think this has been a good conversation. There's obviously a lot of ways that we can go with this, and I think this is something, we know this is going to be important to us going forward as well. Thinking and refining that data and what is the best metric in terms of that in the future, because I think we probably do have different opinions and thoughts. I think private school is really important to be counted in that, along with charter school, but especially for, in the sake of this year, going back to the point that was made about the short time frame, the clearer, the better, in my opinion, in this case. And so something like enrollment, being at PEAM snapshot, if we're the same thing, that hasn't happened in Dallas ISD in how long? That would be a huge win.
Yeah.
Doesn't even matter if other people move back. And then we can kind of refine that as we go forward. So that's my 2 cents on that. But I think on this one, I'd be very open to whatever administration thought made the most sense and was the best there.
Any other comments, Trustee Garcia? Okay, Dr. Hinojosa? Okay, we'll be back on November 15th. Time-
5 o'clock.
Time is now 6:35 PM, and this meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.